Okay, good to go?
I think we are, yeah.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Education Policy Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, December 13th, 2022, and the time is now 5:01. Today we have a very fact-filled meeting. It's going to be a lot of policies that we need to review, the 4,000. I just want to make a note to the public stating that we are on a time schedule today because we have a budget meeting right from here. So we'll be running to the workshop. So this evening we'll do as much as we can to fill in, and anything we don't have time to do today, we will roll over to the next meeting. And with that being said, first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Was everybody able to read those minutes?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Janine, were you able to read the minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Any changes, updates?
There was two minor things.
Mhm.
Something under the discussion of 4,000, my name was mentioned and just a verb was missed. It said, Ms. Ludwig, blank, how the policy, and it should say asked how the policy changed. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then another thing that is pretty minor, but again, they were talking about something I said that I discussed something from the hour, and T should be capitalized, H should be capitalized for the hour.
Okay, thank you. I did catch the hour change. I didn't see the first one that you mentioned, but thank you for that one. Janine, any changes or updates?
No, that's it.
Okay, with that being said, motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mary Ellen, seconded by
Second.
Janine. Okay, so minutes approved, and we will move those forward to record. I don't show any public comments for this evening. Is there anybody online for public comments? No?
Nope.
Okay, well, thank you, Ralph. And I will transfer the meeting to you, Ralph.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to actually be passing the baton off to Ms. Namani, since all of the policies tonight are really talking around our Series 4000, which is our personnel policies. And she'll be reviewing a number of these policies. As Diana, as you had mentioned, we have a couple here that, we're going to try and get through what we can, knowing that there's a time constraint to come here for the next meeting. But for our following January meeting, you're right, we can add whatever we need to. We will be, one thing that I mentioned in last month's policy meeting is that we were going to try to get the grading policy in for January. I think we need to move it to February. So we actually have a little bit more time to be able to, if we don't get to all these policies for the January meeting as well.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and then, yeah, Barbara, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Ralph. So good evening, everybody. So we've completed the process where we've reviewed all of our newly adopted policies, and now it's time to kind of go back and see what, if anything, we should bring back as a policy, right? That's the
Right.
goal. So I've addressed a few, and hopefully nothing too strenuous, because I know there is a time crunch. So if we just want to start to get into it, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. And are we all, I just want to confirm we're all looking at former policy 4112.04, health examinations.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a pretty simple policy, and it basically says at the time of hire, you have to submit a physical just to ensure that you're able to perform your essential job functions with or without any sort of reasonable accommodation. That doesn't mean we can't hire you if you have an accommodation. Obviously, you would submit that paperwork. But we just want to make sure that you are, in sufficient health to work and that you must be free from communicable diseases. This was a former policy that we abided by. All incoming staff would submit a health examination form. Obviously, it's nothing too intrusive, just a basic general good health. And listed below, if you can see it, it cites the general statute that it complies with, 10-207, the duties of medical advisors. So for us here in HR, this was one of the policies that we wanted to reinstate and keep up with that practice that we've had in the past. Does that make sense to everybody, or does anybody have any questions?
No sense. I mean, it does make sense. And so you're just bringing it back. So we did always have this policy.
That is accurate.
Is there a different one for, I don't know if there's one on record for drug testing or anything like that?
So we don't have a specific policy for drug testing. There is a drug test for our drivers. They are required by law to submit to a certain amount of tests. And in terms of drug testing, we don't have a policy, but if there are circumstances that arise, there are situations in which, as a personnel matter, we can request that somebody submit to a drug test.
Okay.
And that's kind of getting into the nitty gritty of like the everyday, and there could be different varying situations. But as a general practice, you're going to bargain for with unions. If everybody who has to come into the district has to have a drug test.
Okay.
And so that's not something that's been negotiated. And so presumably in the past, that is what it has not been a policy, but that does not prevent us from requesting, if there's a situation that arises, that somebody submit to a drug test.
Thank you. Janine or Mary Ellen? Good.
I just wanted to comment that last revised in 1998. So this is probably an example of a good, straightforward, not fancy, but it still seems okay.
Yeah.
I just, that they are able to perform the essential job functions with or without reasonable accommodations. So that seems pretty neutral. It's like with reasonable accommodations that they're healthy, or
without.
without that you don't need any accommodations. So that seems like it's pretty
Straightforward.
clean.
Yeah. And a lot of the ones that I included today, because I made such, not a lengthy, but there's a number of them. I try to include ones that are just kind of simple and very cut and dry. So that way, these are just like the minimum that we want to ensure.
Okay. Thank you. Janine?
Absolutely.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Excellent. So I will move to the next one on the agenda, which is 4112.06, personnel records. Right, everybody can see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is our former policy regarding personnel records. This ensures that, one, we are maintaining the appropriate personnel records, and that people have the opportunity, and there's guidelines about how they can view them, right? These are personnel files that should be maintained in central office. People should be allowed to request to see their file. If somebody puts in a request, i.e. if we get like an FOI request for somebody's personnel file, what that process looks like, they should be, i.e. we would generally notify the employee in writing that we've received a request for their personnel file. So I think just in general, these are the rules that we've abided by in terms of personnel records. Obviously, we maintain personnel records according to state statutes as well, like how long you have to keep documents, how long you keep the personnel records, what's included in personnel. And, you know, at the bottom, it's very clear, medical information obviously is kept separate from personnel files, and everybody has the right to review their file or request a copy of their personnel file. I feel like I just said personnel file about 27 times in one sentence, so I
Yeah.
apologize for being repetitive.
No, that's okay. It's giving us time to read it. I like that it's very detailed in protecting the employee.
Yeah, I was
Thank
gonna
you.
say the same. It's nice and clear, you know, that they can see their own files and, you know, that they're notified and et cetera, and
Mhm.
that it's all included.
And really a lot of this corresponds to when you get an FOI request, because unfortunately being in a school district, the information is readily available to the public. But this ensures that there's a process for employees to, you know if that's being requested. There might be items that we could object to turning over. And obviously that would go through a CHRO, through the FOI commission. So that's why it mentions here, the superintendent shall not disclose requested information unless directed to do so by the FOI commission, the Freedom of Information Commission. And it also lets our staff know what is available to the public,
Mhm.
right? So we don't want people to be caught off guard if there's an FOI request. We are not a private company or organization, we are public. So there has to be that transparency, which we make clear to incoming staff. Right? Like, for instance, records maintained are kept on file for the board by the State Department or board, which are there's records of teachers' misconduct. Unfortunately, those shall be deemed to be public records. They are subject to disclosure under FOI, and they don't require the consent of the teacher. Right?
Mhm.
We want people to understand what rights they have, but also there are statutory regulations about this. And so we can't make a promise to staff members about certain items when we know very well we have to comply with like state laws about this or federal laws.
And about the medical records, that's completely off.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And in terms of medical records, that has to be kept separate. It has to be a locked cabinet. You have to know who has the key to it. There's like all these protocols.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions?
No, it looks good.
No questions, Janine?
Okay, let's go to the next one. The next on our agenda is 4113, assignment, transfer / reassignment. So it says here that the superintendent shall make such assignments and transfers in assignments of employees as in the interest of the school system, reporting his or her actions to the board for information and record. All such assignments and transfers shall be made in accordance with existing employee organization negotiated agreements. So i.e. the superintendent has the right to transfer and move around employees based on the needs of the school. And we always want to ensure that she has that right to make sure our schools are staffed to the best of our ability, with the caveat that we're still complying with whatever collective bargaining agreements there are. So she does have that discretion. Within collective bargaining agreements, there are discussions about management rights, and which essentially is what the superintendent is. But this codifies it in a policy.
And are the management, are there restrictions on some cases that transfer is not, or reassignment is not considered ethical or uh, in compliance with the labor
With our
regulation?
collective bargaining agreements?
Yes.
No, because there's never going to be, I mean, she can transfer within, right? Teachers moving around, possibly administrators. She's never going to do anything that's so that there would never come a situation where it would be out of turn really with those collective bargaining agreements, or she's not going to move a teacher who doesn't have a specific certification into a class where they're not certified. Obviously, can't do that. There are state regulations that we have to abide by. But this just does give her the freedom to move people if there are circumstances arise and she needs to ensure that there's appropriate people in place to staff the school.
Does this
This-
take permanent and temporary transfers? Is this for both? Like say if she moved someone to fill in a slot while they're finding someone.
Yeah, I mean, she ultimately has that right? So she's going to determine if it's, and again, even if it's temporary or permanent, she's still doing it in accordance with like the
Mhm.
collective
But I
bargaining
meant, does
agreement.
this cover both?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no limitation here. It just talks about transfer reassignment. So it doesn't say only for permanent or only for temporary or substitutes, etc.
Okay, I'm
Give
good
her
with
that
that.
latitude.
Seems pretty straight. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks good to me.
I'm worried that I made them too straightforward and now we might go through this list too quickly. So, all right, so let's go on to our next one. This one is has a little bit more depth to it. So evaluation and support plans, 4115. So this is to ensure that for teachers that we have the appropriate support plans in place, what their evaluation should include, how that process should look, implementation. And so this really outlines the evaluation process because that's how we're going to determine what supports are needed for our teachers. So they are aware of how they're being evaluated, how often, which is something that actually the program that does this is housed here in HR. So I think maybe we want to take like a minute just to kind of read through it. And again, this is not something new. This is something that's been in place. It was last revised in 2019.
With no changes, correct?
Correct.
From you, I should say.
Yeah, I haven't redlined or made any edits or changes to these.
Okay.
So I'm going to move down a little bit so you can, and tell me when you're ready for me to move all the way down.
Okay. Okay, try not to move it.
I was gonna
got it.
say, go back up.
Sorry, go.
Yeah. Because we can't read it
Right
when you
here?
move it.
Right here. I'll leave it here and you can tell me when it's time.
Okay.
How's everybody doing?
Barbara,
Okay.
on that paragraph, in the middle, the second large paragraph,
Yes.
the evaluation process for each school year shall be in accordance with the teacher evaluation and what is it? Support program?
Support. It's supposed to be support
Okay, I just wanted to
program.
make sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So
That's
there's
how you
just
know
like,
I didn't, that's how you know I didn't
typo.
make any changes to this, because this was a typo that we're gonna readopt apparently.
I was
Okay.
reading so fast, I just read support. I didn't even
oh,
see the
really? You
typo.
did. I saw the typo, but I mean, we can't change that.
We can
We can update.
change it. Yeah, I can update it.
So, I mean, that's,
But I haven't made any changes. This is literally the old policy, so that's why I wanted you to have the opportunity. Obviously, we can make some
Mhm.
edits in terms of clerical.
do the number of times teachers get evaluate change? I noticed they didn't say the frequency, the report on the frequency,
Yeah.
but
Sure. So Ralph. were you
Yeah, no,
gonna say
no, it does, it's to make the answer, yeah, quickly, yeah, it does depending on their years of service. So it always depends if you're tenured, non-tenured, and what part of the cycle you're in. You may have you may have more observations in a certain year than others.
right. Right. So this is pretty statewide stuff.
And do you want me to go to the bottom just so everybody can, or is everybody still
Yes.
reading?
No,
I'm
I'm
good.
okay.
Thank
Mm.
you.
Janine,
Mhm.
Good, thank
let me. Just on a side note, you should know that teacher evaluations are not subject to FOIs.
Okay.
I didn't hear what you said. Not subject to what?
Teacher evaluations are not subject to FOIs.
Right. Okay. That's helpful. What about this handbook? Is that available to teachers?
Well, we do. I mean, we have a
Mhm.
district handbook.
Handbook.
But I
So
don't know.
it's
if
not
this is-
specific
Yeah.
to being evaluated. It's not an evaluation handbook. It's just a general handbook and
Correct.
evaluation is
Yeah.
not. Okay, thank you. All right.
Mhm.
That was one of our lengthier ones. But it's important, I think, to codify issues that you would assume that are just kind of the bare minimum, but we want that in our board policies because we want people to have a reference guide and it provides some transparency and some information for staff so they know what to expect, what it means, what their rights are, what the expectations are. And it provides that consistency. Obviously complying with state guidelines
Mhm.
overall. Right. Do we have any questions about this?
No,
No, just-
see. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Well, I was just saying, just a comment that this is basically how it works in the state for all teachers, for all people evaluating teachers also.
Mhm. It's very
I was
detailed.
gonna say, if it
That's good.
sticks with the guidelines, then we're good.
Mhm.
Exactly. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the next policy. That is 4116. Certified personnel may attain tenure as provided by law. I think it's very simple. It cites what the legal standard is, the Connecticut statute 10-151. You would think this is not necessary, but sometimes it's always, you may think it's not necessary to reiterate something that's already a legal standard, but we want to ensure that staff knows that we comply with the legal standards. There's no exceptions. There's no change. This is what the rule is. And so it's just good to have that base standard within the board policy. seems
Barbara?
obvious. It seems obvious sometimes, but we like to have it written in our board policy.
Barbara, why not then put the definition in right there?
It cites 10-151 and 10-151 discusses like teacher tenure, because there's different types of tenure, right? You could have tenure could take 4 years, or now I don't know how many years ago it was where they changed to allow for fast track tenure. So if you had tenure in another district, then it would only take 2 years. It describes what the if there's any sort of leaves, how that impacts your tenure, i.e. if you take like a leave more than 90, any sort of leave from teaching for 90 days, if there's a break in service for like 5 years between tenure, then it doesn't get. So that's why it says you maintain tenure as provided by law. So rather than outline all of those, it's just letting you know we comply with what the state statute is.
With all their changes and everything as they go along, you don't have
Yeah,
to keep
and-
changing it. Mhm.
Exactly. Every summer, the state legislature issues, all of these like new legislation and changes. And so this provides the room for it but still letting staff know that that's the base standard. Whatever the law says about tenure, that's what we apply in the district.
Okay.
And lastly, which we do see a lot, not a lot, but which we see, it's an issue, disciplinary action. So 4117. So public complaints, right? They're usually handled by the applicable principal or supervisory staff, because sometimes the public does want to complain about maybe an interaction they had or something. In addition to that, if there's certain complaints that have to be governed by Connecticut general statutes regarding suspension or termination, and I think generally that's what we're talking about is teachers and complying with tenure law and the termination process for that. And so this policy, what I think is great about this policy, it says this policy is not intended to modify the duties and rights under any such statute, because the statute can change. And so at the end of the day, we're complying with it without putting specifics in that would require changes when legislation changes.
Mhm.
And so then this is what the practice looks like in terms of a complaint, right? So if there's any sort of complaint that comes to the board that indicates the potential for employee discipline, this is the procedure that will typically apply, right? It should generally be reduced in writing and signed by the complainant. And this can include an email. It would be referred to the superintendent or the staff who will investigate the matter, or the superintendent might determine who is going to handle the matter. After the investigation, there'll be the information will go out to the individual who issued the complaint, right? Letting somebody know if there's a basis, because somebody might say, you know what, I want to complain because so-and-so teacher didn't say hello back to me when I said hello.
Mhm.
And so that's unpleasant, but that wouldn't necessarily be the basis for an investigation. After the investigation, the superintendent or the staff will inform the board of the results. If the superintendent or the staff find no basis for the complaint, the person who brought the complaint may appeal the finding to the board. Right, so ultimately, there's an investigation and there's a finding that the person doesn't agree with, they can appeal to the board. Even the superintendent or the board, after appeal, determine disciplinary action must be taken against the employee. That action, right, whatever that discipline is, will be consistent with state and federal law and the employee's collective bargaining agreement. I.e., if the employee's collective bargaining agreement requires progressive discipline, whatever discipline is the result of that will comply with that practice. And some of you might be familiar with progressive discipline, I think, for the most part. If not, I'm I'm happy to discuss, but that's generally what we want to make sure that if and when there's discipline, it's appropriate, it's complying with progressive discipline. And obviously there's always going to be exceptions, right? If there's particularly egregious conduct.
No, it seems
Barbara.
very, sorry.
Could you explain the progressive discipline?
Sure. Okay. So, for example, I, Barbara Namani, show up late to work today. And let's say Ralph is my supervisor. Ralph says, Barbara, you got to be on time. Okay, great. A week goes by. I started showing up late 2 or 3 days in a row. Ralph might pull me in again and say, Barbara, we just had this discussion. You know, the expectation, I made it clear, was you have to be on time. You have to be in the office at X time. He might send an email as a reminder, just following up. Okay. A few weeks go by, I show up late to work every day with like a venti iced coffee from Starbucks. And Ralph goes, Barbara, we had this discussion about your lateness. This is conduct that you need to rectify, and I've given you the opportunity. And so now I might get a letter to file. And do you see how it progresses? Eventually there might be suspension or termination.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to make sure disciplinary action corresponds to that process, because that process is actually within all collective bargaining agreements.
Mm-hmm.
But there are cases, for instance, if I, Barbara Namani, you know, engaged in some sort of physical violence against a fellow staff member, that's obviously not going to be a conversation the first time. It's probably going to be somewhere else on that line of progressive discipline.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Does that make sense, everybody? I think, you know, being in the school district, a lot of us are familiar with that term, and it happens a lot in most organizations, I want to say. But,
yes, I'm familiar with the
yeah.
concept, just not that terminology.
It seems very detailed and straight, so I am comfortable with this.
Yes, agreed.
If I had known this was going to move so smoothly, I would have really held us to the task and put more on the agenda for today. So my apologies, everybody.
Oh, wait, we're done? Wait, I thought we were just like on line A with multiple inserts.
So, yeah, no, those were the policies, the first round of policies from personnel that we determined should be brought back.
Mhm. I think the difference is because we've already had these and they're straightforward, really. There's no verbiage to change because it's not like it's we're adapting to the times or society at the moment. These are straightforward actions.
Yeah.
So.
And in terms of reintegrating, that's really that's the goal, because we had so many policies. So we, what we've done is set the foundation, and now we're just putting what is really necessary and reintegrating those in. And we're trying to be very cognizant of that. We're really reviewing all the old ones and trying to siphon out what is necessary to move forward with.
Well, that's good to hear, because I know that we have a lot of policies to go through. But yeah, since we've taken the time to have an hour and a half in our meetings, for the exception of today, moving forward, if you feel that you want to add, just put another item on the agenda for possible policies to review in case we run out of, we go through it a little quicker than expected, then we can definitely move those along.
Absolutely. There's definitely a few more personnel items that we want to address. So for the next meeting, if I think this was good to take our temperature and see how we look at these older ones. But now that I see that we can move through them quickly, I'm happy to put many more on the next on the agenda for next.
But I think most of our updates really at this point are truly those personnel ones. The three ones that we probably will have to, we talked about addressing right now are the grading policy. We've also discussed school governance quickly. That's another policy that we need to make sure we revisit.
Follow
that.
up on. Mhm.
Get that on January. And then the one policy that we're also looking into and I'm working on with Jill Kress is the wellness policy, to make sure that that's been updated in a way that makes sense. And she actually, similar to where Joanne Malinowski realized when she saw the new policy, oh, this now fits with state compliance that I could never get my head around trying to clean up an old policy. This one makes more sense and just add in what we need to from our prior policies, which is what Jill's doing right now. She met with the wellness committee in December so that they could get feedback on the policy, and we should have that cleaned up, and that'll come out to policy agenda 2 as well, as one of the agenda items either in January or February.
Sounds
Right.
good.
Ralph, was it the last time we met, we had a request for a policy on transgender, or there's something in that vein? I mean, occasionally will people come and request a policy on a topic?
Yes, yes, and I do need to follow up on that too, so to figure out how we actually move forward with actually, and this is a student policy that we were discussing, correct?
Yes, yes. So
Yes.
that's, so we have the state ones we're looking at, and then we're looking at our old ones, and then we're occasionally people will bring up a topic.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I will follow up on that one too.
My apologies, everybody. I'm so sorry.
No,
Oh,
this
We're
is
on the
good.
agenda.
No,
Barbara.
it gives us a break and time to eat before our next
Yeah,
meeting.
no,
Because
no
we're
apology.
going, it's going to be a late meeting, so
Ah,
this is great. And like I said, it was just easier. These were just happened to be easier because we're not really making any detailed changes on it, but we definitely needed to review them and move them forward.
right.
So
Are we meeting at the Family Center?
yes, we are.
Double
So
checking.
do we need to vote to
Glad
move
you
them
said
to the
that.
full board?
Yes.
Okay. So if we can take this off the screen so I can see Mary
Oh.
Ellen and
Oh,
Janine, please.
Okay.
No, that's okay. All right, so I need a motion to move all these 4,000 series to the full board.
So
Make
moved.
a mo- oh, Either way.
All right. Motioned by Janine, seconded by Mary Ellen. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that's unanimous. I'll move them to the full board for voting. But anyway, thank you, everyone. This was a good, quick meeting. Again, it's nothing that we had to really dive deep into. That's why it was a short meeting. I don't want the public to think that we're not taking all of these policies seriously. Again, there was no changes to these old policies. We were just reading and updating and making sure that we were in compliance. And with that being said, good night. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in an hour or so. Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Good night.